the president in his State of the Union address, well, actually it was State of the Union. In his State of the Union address, called for an increase in the national minimum wage, which would be about $10.25 to $10.50 an hour if it was where it was in 1968 and adjusted for inflation over the years. And instead, is at $7.25. He said raise it, as I recall, to $8.50, $9. There you go. That's a pretty substantial raise. But it's still below where it was in 1968. It seems like we were doing just fine in 1968. Numerous states have raised their minimum wage, not only without negative consequences, but with explicitly, overtly positive consequences. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, they raised the minimum wage on wait staff from $2 an hour to the state minimum wage, which is over $8 an hour. And everybody was saying, oh, it's going to be a disaster. The sky's going to fall. Actually, no, things went just fine. Harry Veryser is with us. Am I saying that right, Harry?
Veryser.
My apologies. Professor Harry Veryser, professor of economics, University of Detroit Mercy, the author of It Didn't Have to Be This Way, Why Boom and Bust is Unnecessary, and How the Austrian School of Economics Breaks the Cycle. udmercy.edu is the website. I don't get it. How can you argue, as the Austrian school typically does, that the free market is going to solve all our problems when there's no such thing as a free market?
Well, I don't think they do. I mean,
okay.
We all realize that there's a certain limitation in human affairs. The free market is really a practical decision. And remember, there isn't really such thing as a free market or a free enterprise system. It's what happens when certain things are done. It's a byproduct.
Right. It's just like there's no such thing as a free football game. You have referees, you have rules, you have goalposts. Everybody agrees on the rules. And so why? So that being the case, what's wrong with everybody agreeing that if we as a society are going to give business people certain privileges and immunities from financial liability, the ability to deduct lunch and travel, the ability to make a profit, and even if you make a profit in a particular way, pay a lower income tax on it than average working people do. If we're going to give them all these, in exchange for this, at the very least, we're going to say, pay a decent wage.
Sure.
What's wrong with that?
Well, here's the thing. Rhetorically, it sounds very good. And remember, as an economist, my job is not to say what you should do. It's to say what the consequences are, under what conditions you make the decision. So if you make a decision, that's up to you what you want to do. But you should know that everything does involve a cost. And the question is that we are to say, okay, these are the costs involved.
Right, and my question is, what are the costs to society of having a lot of people living in poverty because employers are paying such low wages?
Well, now, that's a very good question because of the fact that, remember, in economics you have something called the principle of regressivity. And what that really says is that people at the lower income levels are affected much more by economic moves and regulations and taxes than people at the upper level. For example, let's say Bill Gates, let's say gasoline went to $10 a gallon, just hypothetically. Well, it's not going to affect the wealthy, like Bill Gates, as much as it's going to affect the person who's, who's working for minimum wage.
But on the other hand, if the capital gains tax went from 20% to 39%, if we did what Ronald Reagan did in 1986 and made them the same, and what Reagan called for, that would affect Bill Gates in a big way, and the average working person wouldn't notice it at all. So, it's a matter of picking and choosing what regulations or changes.
No, wait, you didn't let me finish.
Okay, go for it.
Let's say gasoline fell to 50 cents a gallon. Well, who's going to benefit more? Well, obviously the poor person is going to benefit more. So what regressivity says is as you do these things in the economy and they show themselves in price levels or they show themselves in cost, this is going to have the effect. Now, taxes are different. That's a little bit different.
Well, hang on just a second. Let's just finish this first one. I would argue that if gasoline fell to 50 cents, the people who would benefit the most would be the very wealthy people who are engaged in business, because now the real job creators in our society, the people who spend 100% of their income, are going to have more income to spend, and that's going to create more demand in the economy. It's going to stimulate the economy. There's more demand for goods and services, and so the people who are making the most off the sale and distribution and manufacture goods and services are going to make even more.
Well, here's the situation.
But the Walmart heirs are going to get richer.
Okay. Wait. Here's the situation now. If gasoline, let's say gasoline were to fall to 50 cents a gallon, all right? the poor people, probably gasoline is a much greater percent of their income than it is of the wealthy.
But they have a limited need for it.
Well, yeah, well, we all have a limited need, but but some people's need is much greater part of their income than others is.
Right.
And that's where the principle of regressivity comes in.
But there is a limit to the principle of regressivity. In other words, if somebody's driving 10 miles to work every day, they're still driving 10 miles to work every day. Now they've got a little extra in their pocket. But let's bring this back to the minimum wage here. This is we're talking with Professor Harry Veryser at.
Tom, you mentioned Oregon.
Sure.
Okay?
I lived there for 5 years.
Explain. I was out in Oregon, and I talked to a fellow in Jacksonville, Oregon, who runs a business called the Jacksonville Inn.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the minimum wage. And he said, look, I used to hire quite a few teenagers that would come in here in the summer, and they would go on to get degrees in culinary arts or hospitality management. And he was quite proud of the fact. I mean, he said, I had a number of graduates who've come here. They've done very well and whatever else. This was their beginning job. He said, now look, he said, my business is very tight. He says, when they raise the minimum wage, I'm no longer able to do that. So what's happening is a lot of businesses, just like the Jacksonville Inn, and I'd invite you to call him. He'd be glad to tell you his story.
Well, I'm surprised that he had that problem because this was not a statewide issue. This was just the city of Portland, which is not Jacksonville. So he wasn't confronted with a problem. And it seems to me that
he was.
How so?
Well, he told me that. He said, look, he says.
Well, maybe what had happened was that the competing businesses, other companies had decided to adopt Portland's minimum wage for waiters and waitresses, and so it was spreading, just like the way whenever there's if you've got 12% of the population has union jobs, another 12% will have the equivalent of union jobs because they tend to set the local floor for wages. But that whole phenomena of minimum wage jobs used to be entry level jobs for teenagers. I'm with you on that. I mean, I flipped hamburgers when I was 14 years old, and I had to get a work permit to do it because I was under 16. Or maybe it was under 17 in Michigan. Every state had different rules. And we're to flip burgers at Henry's Hamburgers. And that was an entry-level job back then. And everybody who worked in Henry's Hamburgers when I was working there was under 20 years old. Now you walk in there, you'll find people in their 30s, their 40s. Well, Henry's is out of business, but you walk into McDonald's, you find people who would normally be in a mainstream economy. And I would say that's not caused by the minimum wage. That's caused by this enormous shift in wealth out of the middle class and into the top 1%.
Yeah. Now, Tom, if you take a look at the statistics, when did that start happening?
With Reagan?
No. 1971, when Nixon broke the gold standard. And ever since then, we've had inflation. What you're looking at is the results of inflation. Inflation creates...
Are you trying to tell me we did not have inflation before 71?
If you take a look at the statistics, under the Bretton Woods Agreement from 1946 to 1971, and you can go on BLS.com.
No, the price of gold was fixed, and so and you had 41 currencies around the world that were pegged to the U.S. dollar. I understand that, and that got blown up in 1971. But between Bretton Woods and 71, there was inflation.
The prices doubled. The next 25 years, from 71 to 96, prices went up 4 times.
Well, in large part because the cost of oil went up so much because our society was dependent on oil. There's a strong body of economic evidence that argues that inflation, outside of the inflation caused by the Fed, regulated inflation, is actually the consequence of core commodities going up.
Sure, but what moves core commodities up is the drop in the value of the dollar. The dollar was falling.
But the price of oil went up for in euros. It went up in lira, in guilders.
But oil is priced in dollars. Worldwide, oil isn't priced in dollars, Tom.
But they all had... Well, okay, all right. Harry Veryser, Veryser. I'm sorry, Veryser, professor of economics, University of Detroit Mercy. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you.